Hey, Rob Zabbia here with another podcast that we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about home buying and home selling today. I have a good friend of mine and one of my business associates, Patricia Oliva. So Patricia is with Liberty National. So we're going to be talking a little bit about title insurance, which most of you have no idea what that is. I get phone calls because I do insurance, so they think I'm doing title insurance. But Patricia is the one who handles that. So Patricia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Patricia Oliva. I'm the owner of Liberty National Title. And what sets me apart from majority of the title insurance companies here in the state of New York is that I am a consumer direct title insurance company. Every one of my consumers that I insure, after they close, are able to tell me what title insurance is, the value of the policy, and more importantly, they remember who they purchased it from.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I've bought a couple of houses in my lifetime, and I never refinanced, did all that, and title insurance was involved in all of those. And I've never talked to a title person before, even though you were in my house when you were a kid, and I never even knew that you did title insurance until later in life. So you know, when I do insurance, I do home insurance. So we're insuring the house from when a house has a fire, lightning, you know, hurricane, all of that stuff. So what is title? What does that actually insure?
It ensures that the purchaser of the property owns the home free and clear. So what we do is we check the property to make sure there's no fraud involved in any prior transfers, no current liens against the property that will need to be satisfied and removed off the property, or anything that could have been possibly missed in prior transfers. We ensure the purchaser that they own the property free and clear. What's different about my policy compared to your policy is, I know yours has renewals. My policy is paid once at the closing table, and they hold on to the policy for the life of the home.
So the biggest work that you do is the underwriting or the search to see if there are any old loans that weren't paid off or liens against the house from like a contractor that didn't get paid. What about like permits? Is that part of that, or is that something different?
So we don't insure permits. Permits are if somebody put a pool in or a deck in and they didn't get the proper permit from the town. We don't insure those open permits. We provide them for information purposes only to see if the attorney wants to close with the open permit.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you do title search, you're actually going down to like the county or
we go to the county. Yeah, we search the property back 40 years. And what's nerve-wracking about that is you have to really trust your title examiners that are in the counties, because if they make a mistake in the county records and we insure over their mistake, now the buyer has a claim against the policy. So our work is insured off of the examiner's production at the county, and sometimes liens are missed. People make mistakes, and so we really got to make sure that we're dealing with large, reputable title examiners that have a reputation of not making mistakes.
Gotcha. So when somebody is selling a house, should they do a title search just to see, you know, to hold up any kind of hiccups in the transaction?
Absolutely. I tell everybody that's looking to sell their home to run title against the home. And sometimes I hear, well, I thought that's what buyers do when they purchase the house. The buyer's going to run the title. Why are you telling me to run the title? I'm selling the property. But they're not aware that there could be open liens against the house. Maybe there's red light camera tickets that are now attaching to the property. Maybe they refinance the property and the prior liens are removed but not recorded off the property. These can cause a delay in closing, for that matter, and the quicker we get on them to resolve them, the better off we all are. So I tell every homeowner, check the title to the house. Make sure that, you know, no creditor has attached a lien to the house, or even maybe a lien was attached in error, which I've seen happen quite sometimes, is that there was a lien supposed to attach to another property, and instead it attached to the property that is looking to sell. Title deed fraud is on the rise. There's a property in East Meadow that called us a couple weeks ago. They're looking to sell, and they saw my ad to run title, and long and behold, their deed was stolen by a cyber criminal, and they no longer own the property. Not only was the deed stolen, but the cyber criminal took a mortgage against the property. So this is why title is very important in terms of selling your property and doing it first before you do anything else.
I hear commercials for this title lock on the radio, and I hear, so basically somebody can go to the county and say that they own your house somehow and then take a mortgage against it without you ever knowing about it.
So what they do is they create a deed, they forge your name, they get somebody to notarize. Maybe the notary is involved in the fraud. They notarize the signature. They take the deed to the county to record it. It's signed. It's notarized. That's all the county needs to record the document. And now they have title to your home. The commercials with title, deed lock, I get so many calls about that. Literally more calls than I can imagine. But that's why you purchase title insurance. That is the value of title insurance. You don't need to purchase title lock, because what happens, that title insurance policy protects you for the life of the home. So if the cyber criminal does take control of the property, you have your policy. You file a claim against the policy, then litigation will start or begin on behalf of the title underwriter that insured the policy. And unfortunately, the homeowner will have to wait till the litigation is resolved in order either to sell or refinance the property. So title lock, I tell consumers when they call me, if you have a title insurance policy and it's with a large reputable title underwriter that's not going to go out of business, you don't need to purchase title lock.
So if your mortgage is paid off, because like with home insurance, usually the mortgage pays the home insurance renewals. But so if you pay off your mortgage, you still have that title insurance is still in place after the mortgage is paid off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So unless you refinance and they have a new mortgage and then a new policy, then will go in place?
No, you hold on to the owner's policy of title insurance for the life of the home.
Oh, okay.
The only time you'll ever need another title insurance policy, and it's not the owner's title insurance policy, it's called the lender's title insurance policy. So if the consumer refinances, they'll need another loan policy for the lender, because a new lender is going to give them a new loan. They need to insure that new lender.
That's really cool. I had no idea that it worked that way.
Really. Majority of consumers don't.
So one of the things that you and I, for those of you that don't know, but Patricia and I both do continuing ed classes for realtors. And one of the things when you do your class that I see you talk to the realtors about, which I don't think home buyers really know, is that the title is really purchased by the buyer of the home. But most cases, they're never presented with any options. Most cases, the attorney is setting that up for them. So as a buyer, if I wanted to do my due diligence, I really should look into buying title insurance on my own instead of just relying on the attorney.
Right. It's like any other type of vendor in the transaction. The attorney's not choosing their homeowner's insurance company, and they call you, they form a relationship with you, they like your product, and they purchase the policy from you. They're not given that option with title insurance because it's just standard in the state of New York that the attorney orders on their behalf. But when the attorney orders on the consumer's behalf, they don't have that relationship. They don't know who I am behind the agency. They don't know anything about me. They don't know what my pricing is. And they don't get the experience and the relationship that you're able to offer, right? You're able to communicate with them, offer them a relationship so that they can bring back their friends, bring back their family. So that's really what I'm trying to change is create the relationship with the consumer so they could see that there's a relationship that they're missing in the transaction so that when they go and purchase another home or, their friends purchase another home, they know that, okay, Liberty Title did the right thing by me. I'm going to come back to them again.
So you gave us a story about this house that somebody stole the deed. I'm sure you have a ton of crazy stories of things that have happened with title. So can you give me one example of one of the craziest ones?
The craziest ones was there's a lot of fraud going on in the transaction and it's not being spoken about. So the amount of crimes that are happening in the transactions, the vendors become aware and then it just kind of goes out the window. But we need to create that awareness to the consumer and to the agent. And this is why it's important now more than ever for the agent and the consumer to know who they're working with, from attorneys to title. What's been happening now is the criminals are getting into the email accounts and they're communicating as the attorneys. So title thinks it's the attorney that's emailing us, but it's the cyber criminal. And they're sending us important documents for us to open up. And we think it's the attorney, so we click on the email, and now they're in our email account or in our server. They're creating payoff letters on behalf of sellers, or creating fraudulent wiring instructions. So there was 2 instances last week where the buyers lost their down payment because the seller's attorney sent the wiring instructions to the buyer's attorney, and the consumer wired their down payment to the cyber criminal. It wasn't the attorney sending the wire instructions. It was a hacker in the attorney's email account. As far as title, they're trying to get, we rely on seller's attorney to send us the payoff. If there's a judgment payoff against the seller or there's a mortgage on the house, we rely on the seller's attorney to send us the pertaining document to pay that mortgage off or those judgments off. They're fooling title companies and thinking that the seller's attorney is sending those payoffs, and the title companies are now wiring to the cyber criminal. And what that means is the buyer closes on the house. Nobody knows there's cybercrime involved until the buyer goes to sell or refinance. And that's when we get notified that there was cybercrime involved because there's still an open lien against the house. The buyer now has to file a claim against their title insurance policy, another value of the policy. And then litigation will start, and the homeowner will now have to wait at that point again until they figure out where did the hack come from, who got hacked in the transaction. Maybe it was the attorney, maybe it was the realtor, and everybody just starts suing each other. So unfortunately, that's on the rise. It's happening more often than you can imagine. I know if I'm buying a house or I'm selling my house, I want that to be the first thing that's told to me is that cybercrime is on the rise, and the partners that you're choosing to represent you, they could have hackers or cyber criminals in their accounts trying to steal your hard-earned money. Crazy.
So cybercrime is becoming huge. I mean, we're now when I send an ID card for an insurance card for car insurance, I have to send it through a secure email. I can't just like fax them or email them the way we used to. What kind of things, when it comes to somebody's home ownership, should they do to protect themselves from cybercrime, like with protecting their deeds, protecting their mortgages? Like, what are the best tips what you have for them?
That's a great question, actually, and a great class to offer to the consumer. Create consumer awareness classes on cyber fraud to let them know how to protect themselves. It's just to be aware. Don't put personal information in emails, because you don't know if you're emailing your social security number or you're emailing your date of birth, if it's really the attorney that you're emailing it to, or it's the cyber criminal in the attorney's account. I tell consumers, stop emailing. Just go to the attorney's office and drop off any important information pertaining to the file. I had one consumer the other day that was very well aware of the crimes that are happening and refused to do anything with email. It was all going back and forth to offices, dropping things off. And unfortunately, we might have to go back to that.
Yeah, one of the things we always tell our customers when we're writing, because when I do, car and home insurance, or even when we do life insurance, we need, date of birth, social security numbers, driver's license, all the things that cyber criminals want.
Right.
So we're always recommending to people, do not share any of that stuff via email. Like, I'll tell people, okay, this is like, we'll email back and forth. I have some people, we'll never talk when we're selling them a policy, but when we get to that point, I'll say, okay, pick up the phone and call my office, because we don't want that email out there. Even though I'm not responsible if they email me the information, I don't want them sending that out, because, it'll come through my system. And once it's in my system, it's safe because Allstate's got it all locked down. But somewhere in between, the sender of the email and the receiver, there are ways that these cyber criminals can intercept those messages.
Yeah.
So,
we revamped our systems inside the office. We have Microsoft experts coming in, checking our computers, trying to weed out anything that they think might be fishy. Our emails are flagged down, do not open. It looks a little suspicious. We don't send anything out unless it's encrypted. But unfortunately, the other parties in the transactions are not working to that extent. So, sometimes we're uncomfortable opening documents or opening up emails, especially when it's being flagged. We got to get everybody up to that point where we're all working at the same level as far as trying to offer the consumer the highest level of protection.
So I would say probably the top things people should do, to protect themselves is speak to anybody before you send money. Don't wire any money out until you actually get that person on the phone to make sure that they requested that. Don't share your personal identifiable information, which is name, date of birth, social security numbers, license numbers, anything like that. Don't share that via email or text. And make sure that what I always do is like I subscribe to a service that just keeps an eye on all my stuff. So like when I apply for a credit card, I get a message, hey, you just applied for a credit card. So those are like the top things. Are there any other ideas that you have for people like like this is a must do to protect your info?
Yeah, change your password in your email account. They say change it every 30 days and make the password something you can't remember. Make sure the passwords are not saved into the computers, because if they get into the computer, they have access to your email. And once they have access to your email, it's just field day for them. I actually sat down with a cyber attorney to learn more about how I can offer the consumer ways to protect themselves. And you're right. They said even when you're calling somebody on the phone to verify information, don't assume the other person on the phone is who you're calling, because they're getting, every time they commit the crime, they get one step better each time. There was an incident where a homeowner sold the house and thought they were talking to the attorney, and it wasn't the attorney. It was the cyber criminal with almost one digit. One digit was off in the phone number, and they were calling that number the entire time. And they sent the proceeds of the sale got sent to the cyber criminal. So the homeowner lost almost $850,000.
Holy cow!
Yeah, this is some serious stuff going on.
Yeah. So, I've heard some scary stories about how cyber criminals are using AI. Like I had one of my clients, she got a call from her grandson saying that he was in jail and needed bail money. But somehow they got the grandson's voice, and basically all they need is like 2 or 3 words.
Oh, wow.
Created his voice to send this message to his grandmother, and then she handed over, a couple of $1,000s to somebody who came by the house to pick up the money.
Wow.
To go bail out her grandson. Meanwhile, there was nothing going on. So, just because you get a phone call, if something doesn't sound right, like you really need to watch out and double check. Call that person back. If somebody's asking you for money, like you should call them back to make sure that it's really them. Because now with these, you can hear these songs that are on the radio. I see it all the time. On Instagram, I see it where they recreate songs, like modern songs sung by Frank Sinatra. And it actually sounds like him, but they're able with AI to recreate
So
that.
crazy.
And the criminals now are doing the same thing
Right.
to copy and mimic people's voices. So this way you think you're talking to your attorney, but
Right.
you're really talking to the cyber criminal.
Right. So scary.
Yeah. So what else? What other tips do you have for what about home buyers? Like what should they, because we talked a little bit about home sellers. What should home buyers be doing besides, so we said, shop for the title insurance. They could do that themselves. Make sure, one of the things that I think you and I both always tell people is when you're buying or selling a home, use a real estate attorney, not your Uncle Freddie, who's a personal injury attorney, or your cousin who is a tax attorney. Like you need somebody who knows real estate.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just makes our job that much more difficult. In that, because when we, go to contract to close, we're only dealing with the attorneys. And if it's not a real estate attorney, it just makes it so much more difficult to get to the closing table from a title insurance standpoint, because we rely on the attorneys to provide us with information that we need to clear title. Sometimes when the attorney's in court, for that matter, it takes days for a response. And, we're in the mindset that it's in contract, we got to close. We don't have days to wait for a response. So I strongly suggest that you hire a real estate attorney that's been doing it for a long time and is going to get to the closing table as quick as possible.
Well, I was talking to one of my real estate attorney clients / friends this morning, and he was saying he had a client that, young couple buying a condo, and the real estate agent referred them to him to do the closing. And he went through the contract and saw that, they were buying the condo from the developer, and they were, it's like an $80,000 condo, nothing, but there were $6,000 to $7,000 worth of fees that shouldn't have been in there. So, him as an experienced real estate attorney that does condos and co-ops, he picked up on it, and they were able to negotiate 90% of that away.
Awesome.
So I think that's really where you see the value of somebody who really knows what they're doing and specializes in real estate instead of being a jack of all trades.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, for the buyer, just having more of an understanding about the property before they sign the contracts. Pull the title, call the title company, pull the title, check to make sure there's no fraud involved in the contracts that you're about to sign, right? Check to make sure there's not a lawsuit involving the homeowner that you have to wait for litigation to resolve in order to close on the property. So even for the buyer, pulling title, attorneys wait until contracts are fully executed. I feel like that's too late. We need to pull it at accepted offer, provide you with a breakdown of the fees at accepted offer, explain to you what we're going to do in the transaction to get you to the closing table, and then you go sign the contracts. I know some agents say it's a little bit difficult to do that now because, there's multiple offers on the homes and they don't really have time to wait in order to get to the contract. So in this market, it might make it a little bit difficult because it takes us a day or two to get the preliminary title back. But again, I think it's just important now with all the crimes going on to know before you sign that everything is kosher.
Yeah, when we have a home buyer, we always tell them, and I try to relay it to my real estate agents, is they should really be looking at all of that stuff, including the home insurance. Because
Yes.
we have a deal, as a matter of fact, right before we started recording, I had one of my realtors call me up because they're supposed to close within 24 hours, and the house has flood insurance, and the seller doesn't want to sign the affidavit saying that they're going to transfer the flood insurance over. Why the seller doesn't want to do it, we have no idea. But the only way that this client is going to be able to buy this house and afford it is if they take over the existing flood insurance because they're grandfathered into an older rate because the new rate is 4 times the price. So,
Wow.
like, if they knew that I mean, we're
Wow.
2 months into if they're closing in the next 24 hours, and then we're trying to close now tomorrow, like, that could have been taken care of months ago and they could have walked away from the sale. And they've lost all that time now in being able to look for another house to buy because they're not going to be able to afford this house with the way the flood insurance is going to be.
So who do you blame that on, that they're not being told to get the homeowner's insurance up front?
Well, I don't blame anybody. I mean, the reason we're starting to do these, these messages and these podcasts is to educate the public, because the public, what do people hear about insurance? Save 15% or more by calling, by spending 15 minutes. That's all they hear about insurance. Everybody just thinks insurance is about, well, I'm never going to file a claim, so let me pay the lowest price. That's not what it's about. It's about protecting assets and making sure that you're in a good situation. So education is a huge part. So what my goal is to educate the homeowner, the home buyer, and also the realtor, because they're the ones that usually don't see the problems, because what happens is the mortgage person is cleaning up the deal, when there's a problem. But this is like, everybody thought everything was fine until that the seller was handed the affidavit, and they're like, I'm not signing this. And I'm sure their attorney is telling them not to sign it because it's probably one of those attorneys that isn't a real estate attorney.
Exactly.
And is overly cautious
Right.
and doesn't want them to sign any kind of an affidavit whatsoever.
Right.
And that's probably what's blowing up the deal right now. But that's why it's real important, because if I was able to get involved, when that contract was signed, I would have had the conversation with the seller, explaining to them, okay, listen, the only way this person's buying this house is if they take over your flood policy. Here's the paperwork you need to sign. I need to deal with this with your current broker, because the current broker keeps the policy. It doesn't come over. But we help our clients, the buyers, or the realtors, to get through that process. So it's just a matter of, there have been several steps in that process that you could point the finger at as far as, who caused that to go wrong.
Now, you think that consumers should call you after the contracts are signed or before?
Oh, I think they should. No, they should. Before you sign a contract, you need to know. We had a deal in Massapequa, right by the preserve, north of Sunrise Highway, that it was an 80-year-old couple selling the house, and they didn't have a mortgage, and they didn't know that several years ago FEMA changed the flood zone because they have a creek back there. The house is now considered high-risk flood, so now the buyer has to buy flood insurance.
Wow.
Now, meanwhile, they already signed contract.
Wow.
They already have their deposit. Now they're fighting over whether they're going to get the deposit back because they can't afford the house when their flood insurance is going to cost $4,000 a year. So, yeah, any buyer, before you sign a contract, you need to look into to make sure. and especially in this market because home insurance is becoming tougher and tougher. Florida is pretty much shut down for like it's almost impossible to buy home insurance in Florida.
I heard.
It's
yeah.
just right now you're going through Citizens. I mean that's pretty much it. It's a state-backed program that doesn't have enough money if they get hit with a hurricane. New York isn't that far behind because most of New York is fine. Long Island is a problem, and the reason is that insurance companies buy insurance. If there's a major hurricane, like when Sandy hit, the big company like Allstate, they paid out a couple of $1 billion, but they got a lot of that back because they have insurance.
Right.
So that insurance is becoming the prices are doubling on that reinsurance. That's what they call it, and the availability is half of what it was. So you have companies. Narragansett Bay stopped writing new business in December because of the cost of reinsurance. You have Adirondack Exchange. I just saw a note come across my desk that they're not going to be writing any new policies as of August 14th.
Wow.
So UPC Insurance went out of business in March. Went out of business.
Wow.
They just closed their doors and canceled all their policies.
So crazy.
So, home insurance is becoming much, much more difficult to get here on Long Island, and it's becoming more expensive because of that. So, you need to know ahead of time because just because somebody's paying $1,200 a year for the home insurance now because they've been in the house for 30 years doesn't mean you're taking over that home insurance policy.
So what do you think about listing agents calling you when they put the house up for sale and getting prices for what it would cost for the new purchaser to come in? Can you base the policy off of the property address, or what other information do you need?
What we do, that's a great question. And what we offer to our realtor partners is we'll do a sample quote. Now, there are a couple of insurance agents out there that as soon as the house goes listing, they automatically get emailed a sample quote and a flood quote. The problem is that those are just like instant offers. They're not really looked into.
Right.
What we do is we will check the flood zone. We'll have the conversation because, like I said, the best bet for a buyer is to take over the seller's flood insurance. So we'll make sure to see if that's an option before we offer. Because what would you want to do? Have them, because with flood insurance, if you're paying $1,000 a year, the buyer can take over that policy. Just change the name of the policy, and that's it. They sign the affidavit, and boom, it's done. Can't do that with home insurance, but with flood insurance, you can. So which one would you want to show the buyers? The $1,000 flood insurance that they could take over, or the $4,000 flood insurance they could buy?
Right.
So those are the things that we do to make sure that it doesn't make the house less marketable. But on the home insurance, what we'll do is we'll check the availability of what carriers are writing.
Right.
Because we'll put in an address and it'll say product not available. So, you can throw a quote in there and get the quote and it'll get you to that point. But once you start the application, then they'll say, oh, no, we'll give you a quote on that, but we're not going to write it.
Right.
So it might not be a valid quote. So we do that extra step that some of these things that just automatic, like I can get a quote like Allstate, for instance. Everybody knows Allstate. I can go in and quote any house anywhere. A house on Montauk Point, I can quote that. Never going to write it. Allstate's not going to write a house within 2,500 feet of the water, but I can still quote it. So an instant quote from Allstate means nothing because you don't know if that quote's actually available.
Right. Okay.
So we go through and we'll say, okay, what companies are available, and then shop it for them, and then give them a sample quote that they can present. We give it to them a PDF. They can email it to the buyers. They can print copies of it for an open house.
That's great.
So that way, people can see, okay, this house is affordable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Most consumers that I talk to, they get frustrated because they're told like a week before closing, oh wait, you gotta get your homeowner's insurance, and you have to have it paid in full in order to close. And they're like, well, why wasn't I told about this prior to? And a week before closing is not enough time. They want to shop it around, and they're like, and then they turn to me and say, it's like title insurance. Nobody's telling us that we have to do this.
Right.
Where in the transaction should we have been told that we had to do this? Like, we don't want to be told a few days before closing.
Well, and I don't know, like one of the frustrations that I have, and I'm trying to educate mortgage people about this, is the mortgage people just make up a number for the home insurance. They just totally make it up. They'll just go in there and say, okay, it's $1,200 a year. You haven't been able to buy a $1,200 a year homeowner policy for the past 2 years.
Right.
Unless it's an 800 square foot shack.
Right. Exactly.
In the middle of Levittown.
Exactly.
Where there's no risk for anything or nothing. So, and then what happens is at the last minute, it's like, oh, the house they don't qualify because now the ratios are off. Right. So do they do the same thing for the title insurance?
They estimate the title insurance fees, but they overestimate the title insurance fees. And then when I bring them down to accepted offer, I bring them down. The consumer's like, oh, I thought I was paying $15,000 and it's only $10,000. Why did they tell me $5,000 more? I'm like, but they're trying to protect themselves, so they overestimate.
Right.
But the consumer wants, like, I know if I'm buying a house, I want to know what I'm buying. I want you to tell me, like, what the bottom line, what's it going to cost. I don't want to go into something being told it's $15,000 when it's really only $10,000.
Right.
I'm that type of person, and I think majority of the consumers are that way too. They're just not being offered that for that manner.
So, we both work with a lot of realtors. So what kind of tips do you have for them to be, this is a very challenging market. We were talking before we started recording about you have one that you were talking to and she's got like 12 listings. So what kind of things are you talking to realtors? What are you doing to help them get through this challenging time? Because, what we keep hearing is there's no inventory, interest rates are high, like all these different reasons why people can't succeed. But you and I both know we're working with some very successful people that are selling. I know mortgage people that are doing better than ever. I know realtors who are selling like crazy. So it is possible. So what kind of things do you have for your realtor partners out there, like that? What they need to be doing right now?
Well, for the first time in 21 years in the business, I went door knocking, which is what I was telling you before we were recording. And I had such great success as a title company door knocking because I didn't realize that I had everything the homeowner wants to know, right? They list the property and all the questions that they ask the realtor is really, aimed at the title company. Is my apartment legal? Is my permit for my pool still in place, or do I have to file a new one? I'm getting divorced. Is there anything attached to the house against about my husband, or there was a death in the family, they're entitled to the house. Do we have to? Is there anything that we have to get the estate involved, or one property is owned by a trust? What do we have to do in order to sell the property? All the questions that the consumer was asking is geared towards title. So the agent, it was an agent that kind of he feared door knocking, and I went alongside to help out. I feel like we're in that market now. You got to show value. And we had such great success. He didn't get any listings, but we had a lot of conversations about potential listings. I think agents now need to do what they weren't doing before. So whatever you were doing before, we're not in that market now. Now it's like thinking outside the box. Do more consumer awareness seminars. I love doing those, and I'm sure you do too. I want to be in front of the consumer. Let's get in front of the consumer. Let's talk about the cyber crimes. Let's talk about things that involves their property, right, that nobody's doing. And I don't see agents doing that. There's maybe 4 or 5 agents in the last 6 months that have talked about doing, an awareness seminar. Consumers want to be educated. More importantly, they're confused. They don't know where to go. I'm sitting in my home with a 3% rate. If I move, I'm going into a 6-7% rate. I might as well just stay here. Where am I going to go? They have all these unanswered questions. So when I talk to agents, I'd like, let's not talk to them about selling. Let's talk to them about, where they can go. Let's do a seminar about moving out of state and get their mindset and like, what does it take to move out of state? We get a moving company and we get, insurance company and we get title. We all talk about what does it take to move out of state? Like, what's the steps you have to go through in order to move out of state? I feel that doing those consumer awareness seminars has gotten me through this obstacle of a market that we're in.
Yeah, things are definitely, we're not, we used to do a lot of direct mail. We used to do a lot of telemarketing. In New York, you're not allowed to telemarket because we're still under a state of emergency. And so, yeah, we're doing a ton of, consumer awareness things. I think that's great. And, also I think networking is huge. Finding people, most of the business, believe it or not, most of my business I'm getting right now is from other insurance agents because they don't have markets for stuff. So they're coming to me to see if I can take care of their customers.
Wow.
So I get probably more referrals from other insurance agents than I get from realtors.
Wow.
Mortgage brokers are usually my top as well, but because there's not a lot of transactions happening, that now insurance agents are becoming a big source of business for me just because of the fact that we have, the different markets available. And, and I think education is obviously a big part. So I think the consumer thing, the seminars are awesome. And we, just being a real person, like, get this kind of stuff, as I think, we both offer a social media class. It's kind of similar, but we have a little bit different tweak on it. And what I always tell the realtors in there is, number one, just be yourself. Like, get people to know you. That's what I'm doing this. I hooked up with my friend Tom here, who's behind the camera. And, we're doing this stuff. So it's me. I mean, you can see we're not scripted. We just, before we started this, we just said, hey, what we're going to talk about and have a goal. And then we just started doing it to show what we can do. I think that's what people need to do. I think artificial intelligence, can be good. I think it's going to be very deceptive, though, because think about it. It's whatever the programmers want you to know.
Right.
So if the programmer is let's say, the big bad insurance company, they're going to program the artificial intelligence to buy the policy that they want you to buy.
Right.
Not the policy that's necessarily what you want. And I've had arguments with executives at insurance companies about what kind of coverage why are you selling this coverage? We don't make a lot on that. Well, I'm selling that coverage because that's what the customer needs. Because if they get injured in a car accident, $50,000 isn't going to cover it, and $1,000 a month won't cover their expenses because they can't work. They need the $3,000 for expenses, and they need a $200,000 for medical. But they don't make a lot of money on that. So the insurance executives don't want you to do that. And that's really where the difference, I think, comes in with the education to let the customers know that, hey, this is what you really need and this is why.
Right.
Because if they have artificial intelligence telling them, it's going to tell them what they want to know, not necessarily what you want.
That makes sense.
And I think that's why, I think we're going, and I think some of the basic stuff, I think it's going to make easier for people, but some of this more complicated, like what you and I do, I think it's still going to be lacking for a long time.
Yeah, I know.